Hey guys, how's it going? So, Death Knight is this shiny new class on classic servers, and as expected, everyone and their mother has one. And with the addition of dual spec, each one of them can be a tank. But the class has a pretty unique thing going. There is no dedicated specialization for tanking or doing damage, meaning that, theoretically, you could assign your talent points at random and be a somewhat viable tank. But being able to does not mean being effective. So what is actually the best tanking spec for a Death Knight? Let's find out, shall we? Starting off, there's Blood, the bread and butter tanking spec. But why is it the go-to spec? Well, even though Blizzard originally intended Frost to be the dedicated tanking tree, they eventually pivoted all the best tanking talents to Blood. Talents such as Veteran of the Third War and Abomination's Might that provide passive stat increases do exist in all three trees, but unlike Frost and Unholy, the Blood ones are further down the tree, which makes them harder to grab if you are spec'd in either one of those two. Blade Barrier might as well be considered a passive 5% damage decrease, because you never want to have your blood runes up. And in the situation you need to pop Vampiric Blood, you always have a blood tap available. Speaking of Vampiric Blood, this is one of the greatest tanking cooldowns in the game. While it does give you less HP than Last Stand and Survival Instincts, it increases all healing received by 35%, which means not only your Death Strikes will heal you for 20% of your maximum health, other healers will also heal you for more, which makes it easier to top up a Death Knight if you get some unfortunate big hits. And if you do get under 35% health, all the damage will be reduced by 15% thanks to Will of the Necropolis, which is also very deep in the Blood tree. Like with other trees, Blood Death Knights also bring some utility, but in lesser form. Unholy Frenzy is a 3-minute cooldown that increases physical damage of an ally you put it on by 20% for 30 seconds, which is a pretty good boost in raid environment, but it's only a single target boost, so it's not as big as it could be. All in all, Blood tanks are truly the embodiment of the phrase Jack of all trades, master of none. They don't offer reliable AoE threat, weight-wide buffs, or the best single target threat, but they're easy to heal and can dish out some respectable damage if you're willing to drop extra talents into it. Moving on to Frost, it is said to be the Blizzard's intended tanking spec, and there are signs pointing to it, such as Frost Presence being the one with threat increase and damage reduction, talents and cooldowns that give armor and mitigation, and the general fantasy that ice is unbreakable. Well, this one might be a stretch, but come on. The general idea of Frost Death Knight is to be what Fury tanks were in classic WoW, dual-wielding, single-target threat monsters. But the support for that fantasy is pretty lacking. Threat of Therian, talent that makes your special abilities hit with both weapons, was only added in patch 3.2, which made dual-wielding prior to that very reliant on auto attacks. The choice of weapons is also not really good. The only tanking weapon in Wrath that is slower than 2 seconds drops in Extremis, after which you either go with 2 fast tanking one-handers, or take one-handers off from rogues, at which point, why not just go with the two-hander? But the biggest problem with dual wielding is parry haste mechanic, which is still present in Wrath raids up until Ithcron Citadel. Parry haste is a mechanic which makes the next melee swing after parrying come 50% faster, and it works both ways, for players and bosses alike. And since you're the tank and you're hitting the boss in the face, you will get parried unless you are expertise capped. As a Frost Death Knight, you would need 418 expertise rating to reach parry cap, which is very unlikely to happen in Extremis phase. And the more hits you make with both your weapons, the more you will get parried, which might result in some unfortunate one-shots. Frost talented cooldown, Unbreakable Armor, increases your armor rating by 25% and strength by 20% for 20 seconds once a minute for the cost of 1 Frost rune. Which would be amazing, if it costed a Blood rune instead. Frost runes, and Unholy ones for that matter, are your main source of damage and threat, and putting them on cooldown without immediately doing anything is not a good idea. While it could be combined with Blood Tap and even bound to a single macro, you could use that Blood Tap to hit an extra Obliterate after refreshing your diseases. In general, Frost tanking looks really good on paper, but it feels pretty lackluster. And unless you're speedrunning and want every member of the raid to do as much DPS as possible, tanking as Frost just feels like a worse version of a Frost DPS. And the last, but not least, is Unholy. Looking at the talents themselves, you would not find many that are suited for tanking other than Bone Shield, which decreases your damage taken by 20% for the next 3 hits you take. Which is not much, but it may ease up damage taken on encounters such as Maxna, where you know when to pop up damage reduction, and you know several hits of reduced damage will be enough. It may also be put up before the fight, which as Unholy tank or DPS you should always do. Other than that, tanking as Unholy is all about damage done rather than damage taken. Your auto attacks do more damage, your diseases increase the damage of other diseases, and if your raid has no Warlock or Moonkin, you provide a 12% increased magic damage to the target debuff, all of which you could also do as Unholy DPS. Magic suppression makes you take 6% less magic damage at all times, which is useful in heavy magic fights like Sephiron or Kel'Thuzad. But where Unholy tanks shine is in AoE situations. Thanks to Impurity, your Death and Decay and Blood Boil do 20% more damage, and the Wandering Plague talent makes your diseases sort of crit, damaging all enemies in 8-meter radius. These two things make Unholy Death Knights have AoE threat on par or even better than the Paladin, but also be squishier in the process. You win some, you lose some. All in all, while all 3 specs can technically be viable tanks, Frost and Unholy have their specific niche, outside of which they are slightly below Blood in viability. But if you want to top the damage meters as a tank, and are confident in your healers, do make sure to try out those two. This is how much DPS you can expect to make as a level 80 Death Knight fresh out of Heroics. Same gear, no buffs, no enchants, using Frost and Unholy dual wield spec from WotLK. And that's about it. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe to help the channel out, and thank you guys for watching.